Hi everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel. This is Luvcoding.com. Today we shall be talking about object-oriented programming with Python, and we shall be looking at classes and objects in Python. You can check us up on our website on Luvcoding.com, or you can visit our Facebook page, like our Facebook page to get regular updates, or you can visit our ResearchGate page for some useful resources. So basically, I just use this as two samples. The first one is a class for rectangular objects. So this basically defines the class. We can call it any name. So let's say we call it a rectangle class. It means from this rectangle, you can create other similar rectangles. We can, for instance, create a rectangle which is not exactly the same size as the original rectangle, or another rectangle which is even smaller than the original rectangle. So these basically are two kinds of classes. This one class for rectangles and another class for circles. So from this class definition, you can create instances of this class with different properties. That is why this rectangle is a kind of it's similar shape to this one, but it's black, and this is same color. So you can create as much object from this as possible and then change their properties, their individual properties. So even for the circle is the main class, but it can have different kinds of types of circle with different individual property. And those are what we call the instance variables. You can change the instance variable to suit every new circle like this one or like this one. Each time you create a new circle, you can change the variables, the instance variables, to fit in the nature of the object or the nature of the instance you're creating. So we can create so many more circles from this class definition, but we change the instance variables to suit the properties of the new instance we're creating. Just like it is in this rectangle class, we have two rectangles from this class, but two of the rectangles have different colors and different sizes. So that is basically what a class is. A class is a framework for defining new objects, for defining new items. Then the items you create from the class is called an instance, and then it's called an instance, or they are an object of this class. So you can say they are an object of this class, or they are an instance of this class. So now we shall be looking at how we can create classes in Python. Creating classes is very simple. You just simply write the keyword class, and then the name of the class. For now, let's say we want to create a class for all rectangles, or just a class for rectangles. So we'll give the name of the class as rectangles. We have just created a class. The name of the class is rectangle. So assuming there are no functions or variable or any member for the class for now, any value for the class for now, we could just use the keyword pass for now to hold the class, and then we could use the class to create some instances of the class. So in order to create an instance of the class, you simply write the name of the instance. Let's say box1, call it box1 equals is a rectangle. So box1 is a kind of rectangle. Remember, the class is like a container of different characteristics which other elements or items can inherit from or benefit from. So box1 is a kind of a rectangle. So we'll say box1 equals rectangle. Then you put the bracket in front of it. So we have just created an instance of the rectangle, and we can see maybe print the value of the rectangle, the box one that we created, to see what it contains. Remember, all the properties of the instances depends on the property of the rectangle of the class. Because there are two major components of every class, the class variables and the instance variables, each instance, like the box one we have here, could either inherit or take a value from a class variable or the instance variable. So we're going to come to that, but for now, we have simply seen how to create a class by just simply typing class and the name we want to give to the class. Then for now, we just use the pass keyword to hold the class for now, and then we created an instance of the class by just just using any name equals rectangle. Simply means box one has the characteristics of the behavior of rectangles. So if we print box one, you can say print box one to see the content of box one. Of course, it doesn't have any content, but let's see. So let's print the value and see what it's going to look like. So this is what we have. This is the outcome of printing box one. This simply tells us that a rectangle object has been created in memory. So this is a space the box one has reserved for the object called box one. So there is an object now, which is a kind of rectangle, that is box one, and it is stored in this memory location. If you on our website, you could read the materials, our document on classes, to get more details. We have, I think we have shown the link below before. You can check the link here. So the link to our website can be found here. Here, just go to luvcoding.com and go to Classes and Objects in Python. Go to Python and then go to Classes and Objects to give you more details about objects and classes and objects in Python. So for now, we have created a class and an instance of the class, and this is the position of the class in the object, the instance. So you can use the word object or instance. Instance simply means this is just an example of the class we created, or this is an object. This is a rectangle object. What kind of object is box one? Box one is a rectangle object. So now the next thing we want to look at is how to add some properties, because we can't just create it and leave it at the memory location here. We need to add some properties to it so that we can refer to it later. For instance, if it's a class about students, we should add student names, age, class, and level, or anything. But because this is about rectangles, we should be able to define some properties for the rectangle. So in order to do that, we use the dot notation to add properties to our instances. So we can say something like box one dot name equals, let's say, is a rectangle. So let's say rectangle. We can say box one dot width, the width of the rectangle, width. Let's say 20 or anything, any number. So let's just say 20 for now. So we can go on and add as much properties as we want. Now, if we want to know the value of the name of box one, remember that box one is an object, is a rectangles object. So, but what is the actual name of box one that is saved in the memory where the object is created? You can query, you can find the name by simply saying print. So just say print box1 dot name. So print box1 dot name, it gives you rectangle because that is the name. So we can also have other objects or instances of the same rectangles class. We can have about 1 million objects or instances of the same class. Just like a student class, you have about 10 million students, 5 million students. Each of them is an instance or an object of the class student. So for each student, you have their properties, their name, their age, their sex, their courses, and all that. So we're not just going to have only one object for the class rectangle. So we can have another box, call it box 2. As much instances or objects as possible. So we'll call this box 2. Box 2 is a type of rectangles. So we can also add properties to box 2. So the name of box 2 will be, let's call it square. And its width could be 23. We can go on and on up to box any number. So let's add one more box, call it box 3. Let's say the name is, what name now? Trapezium. And the width, for instance, just any name, the width is 15. So we can go on and on and on. But if you look at this, if you're going to be creating each instance and their properties, then there is no need to create a class. A class is supposed to be like a framework, like a foundation for building other objects on which you build other objects which have similar characteristics as the class. So if you're going to be creating each object and each instance with a new name, with new properties, each time you're creating a new class, you add a new property. You add properties of the each time you're creating a new object, you add properties of the object. Then building a class or creating a class or defining a class does not have any value. So to see the functionality or the advantage or the usefulness of a class in programming, we should be able to create a simple function that has all these properties so that each time we create a new property, a new instance, it automatically have all the properties of the class without having to declare them every new time you create the object. So the third thing we're going to have is to add properties. So we have add properties and we have queried the properties. We have done that by printing the property, the instance on the object to see its properties. So we printed box1 and box1.name, and we saw the name here. So we can do that for all of them, print their width and all that. So, but like we said, if you keep repeating this property for each and every object of the class, assuming you have 100 students in the class, and for each student, you have to enter student name, student height, student age. For each student, you might not even have the space. It's not space efficient and it's not time efficient. So class is meant to reduce the length or repetition of codes in a program. So now let us see how we can use this class to reduce the length or the repetition of the code. So in doing that, what we need to actually do is to initialize the class. Although you can actually define a method without initializing the class, but it's very, very useful for you to initialize the class so that each time a new object is created, it automatically takes the properties that has been defined in initialization of the class. So to initialize the class, we use a method called init method. We define a method. I would really advise you visit luvcoding.com and go to Python, then classes and objects in Python to get our full documentation on classes and Python. It's highly detailed and very clear, and at least you can get a better understanding of classes and Python. Classes in Python. So now I want to define an init class to initialize this class. Remember, initialization is giving an initial value to every new instance or object that's going to be created from this class. So init. So now, for each new instance or object created, you want them to automatically be able to access name. So the name, the width. We're going to use just that two for now. Yeah, but before we continue, we should remember that in order to define any property in the method of a class, you should include the keyword self. The self keyword simply tells the class to refer to itself. So whatever property you're going to be mentioning within the class, each time you use a self keyword, it allows the program to read the value of the class you have indicated using the self keyword. So it's important to include a self keyword here, telling the class that this definition here, this method defined here, is for itself. So that each time I call any object.name, it knows I'm talking about the name of the object that belongs to that's the class that belongs to the class. So the class knows that that object, that name they're talking about, is the name of an object that belongs to it. So that is the usefulness of including the self keyword. So after that, the next thing you're going to do is, just like in every other normal method and functions, you now say something like self.name. So for each time a new object is created, the name of the object will be the name that is supplied as the parameter. The name of the object, that is why we say self.name, will be equals to the name that is supplied here. Whatever name we supply, so we can use different, we can say self.naming or anything. Self.naming is equals name. So I want to copy this. And self.width or width or anything, self.width equals width. Make sure you have exactly, it must be exactly the name. The name on the right side here must be exactly the name here, because this is the variable. This variable here holds a place for whatever value you're going to be entering as a width. So it must be the same name if it's going to if it's going to be useful for you to supply new variables or new values. So if I put a different name here, the program will not, the code will not understand this name, because there is nothing like width here. So but if I put the right name width, so it knows this is a variable. This variable here is the same variable. So whatever value you're going to enter here will be used to replace this one here. The name on the left could be anything. It's just to create a space, to create a memory for whatever value you're going to be entering. So having said this, now the class has a single method called the init method. The init method is used to initialize a class. And like I said, it helps the class to define its initial values. So at each point in time when a new object is being created, all the class does is to just refer to its init method and then get the values of the parameter of the init method. So now we can create new objects without supplying the properties at all times. So when you create a new object now, remember the init method has some parameters, name and width. So you need to supply the name and width. So let's say rectangle 1, let's say the name is a square. The name is square. This square is for this name here. So I am supplying this square here to replace this name here, and I'm supposed to supply a new value for width. Each time I create a new instance of the rectangle class, I'm supposed to include two parameters, which is the name of the object and the width of the object. So each object are likely going to be different. So let's say 30 for the width. What am I writing? Okay, so the same thing for all of them. You give them their names. This can be rectangle. Remember the class name is rectangles, but this can be rectangle. Rectangle can be anything. And let's say the width is 35. Here, this can be a box, a cuboid, and the width could be 10. So with this, you don't have to keep repeating box1 dot name equals square. Box1, you don't need to keep repeating. Just declare box1 as an instance of the class rectangles, and then include these values, parameter values, to replace the name and the width. Automatically, the class knows that the name for the new object is the name you supplied, and the width for the new object is the width you supplied. So let's put name here so that we don't confuse ourselves. So let's try and print maybe box3 dot name now. We'll print it. Print box3 dot name. So we'll run this. So box3 dot name is cuboid. So basically, this is how a class is created in Python. Simply write the keyword class, the name of the class. Then at the beginning, we use a pass keyword to reserve the space to just hold the class. But after that, we define an init method to initialize or to create initial value for every object of the class. So whenever a new object is created, it automatically assumes, the class automatically assumes that whatever is supplied here is the name and the width of the object. And instead of creating new objects and the properties each time by saying box1.name equals this, box1.width, and so on, it is simpler and better to simply create an init method and declare the parameters, the value of the parameters at once. One other thing I would like us to know is the difference between the class variable and an instance variable. So very simply, all the variables that are under the init method or under any other method we are going to declare later. Let's say def area. So we can say this is an, sorry. Oh, what's wrong with me? Okay. So call this area is a new method. Okay, so it just returns return. What is wrong? Return. Oh, returns. Okay. It just returns self dot. It just returns self dot width. Let's say multiply by 2. That is what this new function or method does. It simply returns self dot width multiplied by 2. It's giving us this. That means there's something wrong somewhere. What is wrong? Dot width divide by times 2. Don't know why it's giving us this error message. Undefined name self. Oh, sorry. Was supposed to include self here. Sorry. Okay, so self dot width multiplied by 2. Yeah. So that is what that is the value, that is what this area method is going to do. Each time the method area is called, it returns the value of the width multiplied by 2. So to see the importance of the init method, just assume we do not have this init method now. If you want to refer to any of the items in this method, you must call the name of the method. Like in this case, let's use box2. So print box2 dot area print box2 dot area, or we can say, oh no, box3, sorry, box2, or we can say something like L equals box2 dot area, then print L. So you can do something like this. Yeah. So let's run it and see. Then I will explain to you why it's important. 70. Okay. How did we arrive at the value 70? Box2 dot area. Since box2 is an object of the class rectangles, we have used box2 to call this function. There is no how you can access the values inside the function without accessing the function itself. For you to access any value inside this function, you need to access the function itself. So to avoid that, the init method allows you to access all the items in the init method without having to refer to the function itself. So we can say something like box2 dot name or box2 dot width. No. So I think we're going to stop here for now. So what have we learned today? We learned how to define a class, create an instance of the class, add properties to the class, query the properties of the class or the properties of the instance of the class, create additional method for the class, and access the items in the method of the class. So we're going to stop here now, and we're going to continue in the next video. Thank you.